Welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. For years, I improvised a new bedtime story for my children every night. Now, we would like to share the recordings of the best of those stories with you. I hope you enjoy my Stories for Wonderful Children.
Noticed that several times in the past week or two I've gotten home unusually late. Part of the reason for that is that it has been taking me longer than usual at my book vault. And that's because I'm afraid we've had a little bit of an infestation.
What's an infestation, Daddy?
It means that there are unwelcome visitors in my story vault.
What?
I have had an infestation of whiners and moaners.
Whiners and Moaners?
Whiners and moaners.
What's that?
And it makes it very hard. Whiners are these little creatures that they wander around wherever they are, and it's hard to see them, but you can always hear them because they are always making a noise that they get their name from, and the noise goes, why, 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 just like that. And they do it all day and all night long. They never sleep. They never eat. They just wander around whining.
What are moaners?
Moaners are like whiners, except they are not really small. Moaners are kind of big. They're about the size of Peanut, except they're not cute like Peanut. They're sort of gray and lumpy, and they don't move around much. They just sit in the corner of wherever they happen to be, and they go, oh, 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 and they do that all day long. Now, moaners do eat. Moaners eat whiners. Whenever a whiner gets too close, the moaner has a long tongue, sticky tongue that sticks out like a frog, and it just snaps the whiner up and eats it, and it stops moaning for just a second. And then it goes back to, Well, this has been causing several problems in my story vault. First of all, is that my story fairies have been unable to catch any rest. Although they go home to sleep at night, fairies need a lot of sleep because they're so busy, and so they usually take a little nap at some point in the day to stay well rested. But they have not been able to nap in the book vault because it's so noisy with all the and all the why going on all the time, and it keeps them awake. And so because they are sleepy and not well rested, they fly more slowly, and they don't think as clearly, and they don't talk as clearly. And then the other problem is whenever I get to the story vault at night, Rebecca, my chief story fairy, has trouble hearing me because of all the moaning, and all the why. Well, last night was the worst. The infestation had gotten so bad that I had to shuffle my feet so that I didn't step on a whiner by accident, because there were so many of them. And all four corners of the story vault had moaners in them now. And there was a fifth moaner that was wandering around the room looking for a corner, but I couldn't find one because all the corners already had moaners in them, which just made it moan louder. and it was so loud that Rebecca could not hear me at all. So I had to wander around the book vault looking for the story that I wanted, and in the end, I couldn't even find it, which is why I didn't tell you all a story last night, because I didn't have a story, because I hadn't even been able to find one that wasn't a repeat. So instead, after failing to find the story, I knew that I had to do something to get rid of the whiners and the moaners, because otherwise I was never going to be able to tell you all another story again. It was just ridiculous, and that was completely unacceptable. So, instead, I left into Literata, and I walked away from where the story vault is, and I went to the building that is in the very heart of Literata. It's the building that supplies Literata's magic, and it is the library building. And I went inside, and I went to one of the powerful mages that works in the library. And she is called a reference librarian. And I told her that I needed a book about whiners and moaners and other sorts of beasts that infest story vaults. And she looked through her books and she said yes. And she got me a book called The Bestiary of Story Pests. And it was not a book that could be checked out, so I had to stay in the library and read it. And I read through it, and I read that the moaners tend to only be where whiners are, because that's what they eat. So I knew that if I could find a way to get rid of the whiners, the moaners would leave, because they wouldn't have anything to eat. So the real problem was that I had to find a way to get rid of the whiners, so I read about whiners. Nobody really knows where they come from, and no one knows how they live, since they don't eat and they don't sleep. They seem to like to infest story vaults, particularly story vaults that have stories that are told to children. But there are some things that they do not like. They do not like sunlight, they do not like rainbows, and they hate laughter. So, I knew what I had to do then. I quickly borrowed a sheet of paper, and I was running behind at that point because I knew Mommy already had dinner ready and I had to hurry up and get home. So I got out a sheet of paper, and I borrowed a pencil, and I wrote down all the best jokes I could think of. I wrote down all the best jokes that Diana's ever told me, and I wrote down all the best jokes that Rebecca's ever told me, and I wrote down all the jokes that I could think of, and I wrote them down as fast as I could until I had filled up both sides of the sheet of paper. And then I returned the book to the reference librarian, and I ran back to the story vault. And I waved, because I had to go. I went and got in my car, but I left the joke sheet with Rebecca, my head story fairy. And I pointed to all the fairies to show that they were all supposed to read it. And then I left. And when I got there tonight to get my story for tonight, as soon as I opened the door, I had a smile on my face, because I did not hear any why, and I did not hear any did not hear any of that sound. All I heard was a little tiny bit of fairy laughter, and I walked in, and the fairies were looking at one of the jokes, and they were sort of giggling a little bit, and I said, "So it worked?" And Rebecca said, "Oh yes, thank you, we've been able to catch naps." And the jokes you left were really funny, and as soon as we started reading them and laughing them, all the whiners started leaving. And after the whiners had pretty much cleared out, the few that didn't left got eaten by the moaners. And then after there had been nothing to eat, no whiners around for several hours, the moaners just got up and left. And I said, "Excellent." And I said, "Well, I know I didn't tell you last night what story I want, so tonight I'm just going to tell my girls about why I don't have a regular story tonight. But tomorrow night, I would like the story of the Wumpus and the Great Red Dragon. And Rebecca said, okay, I'll get that one ready for you. And so tomorrow night, I should have for you the story of the Wumpus and the Great Red Dragon. But that, as you know, is the story for tomorrow night.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's show, but questions and running commentary were supplied by my children. The theme music was created by Brandon Thompson, and our wonderful logo was designed by Silas Swindlin. If you know someone who might enjoy the show, please tell them about it. Do you want more stories? You can now subscribe to the show and help pick a new story for me to tell every month. The show's website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.com. Until next time, I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.